You love stories, and you may want to create your own. The easiest way to do so is to make a list of your 10 favorite stories, whether they are books, movies, music albums, or games. Once you've written this list, you want to extract 6 characters, your 6 favorite characters, or 6 characters you think you may want to use for your own stories. What is the point? You want to create a diversity of profile, so taking 6 characters, or between 6 and 12 characters, if you think 6 is not enough, will allow you to create the appropriate amount of diversity in your own story, your own series, your own world. Once you define the proper amount of character you want to use, you want to define 2 contexts out of these stories. A context is the combination of a genre and a setting. Now, which genre do we take into account? Action, adventure, comedy, drama, horror, and saga. Now for settings, you can have multiple types of settings like romance, like mystery, like zombie, like war, like western, pirate, swashbuckler, and so on. You want to consider the 2 main contexts you love the most, or the combination of the genres you love the most and the settings you love the most, in order to define the contexts of your stories. Finally, you want to make a list of 10 most memorable scenes. It doesn't have to be one for each story. If you can do so, it's better because it will help you into balancing diversity and rhythm, but try to find 10 scenes that you find the most memorable, and try to see how you can combine them and how you can refine them to put them into your own stories. You need to make a list of 10 stories. How do you pick them? You should find some form of commonality between these stories. They should have common points, even if they are not evident. Now, what's the point of finding the common traits between all of your stories? It will add to your own story a lot of cohesion, a lot of coherence and consistency if you can find them and match-make the different common traits between all these stories. Now, where do you look at them? You look at them in the characters. Think about the characters' interactions. How do the characters interact in your story number 1, which may be a comedy? How do they interact in your story number 2, which may be horror? And how do they interact in your story number 3, which may be drama? Now, you want to think about the common traits between comedy and horror and drama and comedy. You'll find many of them, and the best way to put them into perspective, to display them, will be through the characters' interactions. So think about the characters' interaction, watch them act, and which is why looking at scenes is the most important because it's the easiest, and then you'll be able to improvise more easily. You can find common traits in the storyline itself. In the storylines, your character, whether it's in a comedy type of story, a horror type of story, or drama type of story, your characters will have to face struggle. So if you can find 3 different genres, it's even better because your characters may be facing 3 different the same kind of situation, but because they face the same kind of situation in 3 different genres, they'll have to act differently because it's not the same stakes. In a horror genre, a fight in a horror story is not the same as a fight in a comedy story. Now, it will bring you a lot of diversity and a lot of continuity. Finally, the scenes. That's the most important part of your research. You want to be able to find 10 scenes which you can remember at any time, that you want to understand, that you want to be able to use. Now, that's the most important thing when it comes to improvisation. If you can remember, if you can have that portfolio of 10 scenes or more, if you can find more, you will always be able to improvise any story in any situation. Think about that. That's the most important thing about writing. You can be, if you're able to abstractify these 10 scenes, you can be able to improvise any story at any moment. Just think about that. That's the most important part of this exercise. Now you've picked your 10 stories. Now you've picked your 6 to 12 characters. Now you've picked your context and your 10 scenes. You want to add even more of yourself in these stories in order to make these stories your own to the end. And the best way to do that is go through your hobbies and interests. Now, the easiest way to turn your hobbies into something interesting for your public is to turn your hobbies into characters. You want to put an emphasis on the likability part of your character, because that's what will create some instantaneous attachment. But now, focus about listing your hobbies. Just try to find 3 or 4 hobbies that you really, really enjoy, and try to classify them in these 3 categories. You want to find one hobby that procures you a high amount of pleasure. For example, in my case is games, video games, board games, card games. That's a hobby that procures you an intense level of pleasure. You want to find one hobby which calms you. Here again, in my case, it's drawing and painting. And you want to find one hobby which allows you to grow. Now, again, in my case, I think writing is the hobby or the interest or the job which procures me the most growth, the most development, the most way to evolution. And really, I use the word hobby here, but again, if we get back to this 3 examples I'll give you for my case, they can be hobbies, they can be interests, they can be your future job if you consider them this way. For example, if you want to be a game designer and you particularly enjoy video games, card games, board games, put them here. They're not just hobbies, they're hobbies for now, but they're your future job, and see them as that, because now you can create characters who have these hobbies. So for example, you create a character who wants to create a card game, but by the end of your story, she did it. She built her business. She she created her brand. She promoted her game, and now she's successful. That may be your story. That may be your next story. We picked 10 stories. We linked them together, and we talked about our hobbies. We turn our hobbies into characters. Now, in order to make your story even more your own, you want to put other aspects of your identity in it. As many aspects as you can, in fact. So what's your identity? Let's consider I'm an individual. Okay, I'm an individual and I have friends. Now these friends, they're all different. I have 4 friends and they're all different, and they'll help me in different manners. So how can they help me? Now they can help me to refine my interest. What do I like? What I like is likely to be what they like as well, which is why I have 4 different friends. Maybe I have one interest in common with each of them. Maybe they have interests in common as well, but let's focus on you for now. So I'm an individual. What do I want? What are my interests? Now, what are my behavioral traits? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And as an individual, what can I do easily? And what do I struggle to do? Now, how can I find some degree of synergy between these 2? Finally, I'm an individual, I'm a person. Now, what's my goal? That's your why. That's your memorability factor. That's your long-term factor. Once you've defined what you like, what you want to define the why. And it will always come back to your friend, your identity, yourself. So I'm an individual. I have these 4 friends or more. What do they bring to me? What do I bring to them? What's our relationship based on? Now, from that, I know what my interests are and what my behavioral traits are. From all that, I can define my goal, and my goal will become my why, and my why will become my story. If you've enjoyed this episode, you may be interested by this other video on the same topic.